Have you ever noticed how the world feels different after Fajr? The noise hasn't started yet, the worries are still asleep, and your heart is softer than it will be all day. At that moment, when most of the world turns away from Allah, Allah turns toward you, and within the Qur'an, Allah teaches us exactly what to ask for in moments like these. A dua so powerful, so complete, that if you hold on to it after Fajr, it can quietly change your life. Today, I want to share a Quranic dua I never miss after Fajr, and why Allah wants you to recite it. The time after Fajr carries a weight that cannot be measured by clocks or calendars. It is a time Allah Himself highlights, a moment in the day where the unseen feels closer and the heart is more receptive. After Fajr, the world is quieter, distractions are fewer, and the soul is not yet burdened by the noise of responsibilities. This is why worship at this hour feels different. It penetrates deeper. The Quran was revealed upon hearts that were awake, reflective, and still, and the early morning mirrors that state. When a believer sits after Fajr, there is a purity in intention that is harder to achieve later in the day when worries, conversations, and obligations begin to crowd the mind. Spiritually, this time is powerful because it comes immediately after obedience. You have answered Allah's call when many remained asleep. You have stood before Him when your body wanted rest, and that sincerity opens doors. Angels witness Fajr, and the remembrance that follows it is surrounded by blessings unseen. The heart at this moment is softer, less defensive, more honest. Supplications made after Fajr are not rushed. They rise slowly, carried by stillness and sincerity. This is why many of the righteous guarded this time carefully, not filling it with idle talk or distractions, but preserving it for remembrance, reflection, and quiet connection with Allah. There is also clarity after Fajr. The mind is fresh, the soul has not yet been pulled in multiple directions, and the fitrah is closer to the surface. When you ask Allah for guidance at this hour, it is not drowned out by desire or fear. When you seek forgiveness, it comes from awareness rather than guilt alone. This time sets the spiritual tone of the entire day, shaping intentions before actions and anchoring the heart before it steps into a world full of tests and temptations. Allah's mercy is not only in what He gives us, but in what He teaches us to ask for. Human beings often do not know what they truly need. We chase what shines, we ask for what seems urgent, and we overlook what our hearts cannot survive without. In His compassion, Allah does not leave us to our own limited understanding. He places words upon our tongues through the Qur'an, guiding us toward supplications that protect our faith before anything else. When Allah teaches a dua, it is a sign that He wants to give, that He wants us to turn to Him with awareness, humility, and trust, rather than confusion and desperation. Within the Quran, Allah does not teach us to ask only for ease or success, but for guidance, steadfastness, forgiveness, and mercy. This itself is mercy, because a heart that remains guided can endure hardship, while a heart without guidance collapses even in comfort. Allah knows how fragile the human heart is, how easily it sways, how quickly it forgets. That is why He teaches us to ask repeatedly, to beg Him to keep us firm, to correct us when we slip, and to envelop us in His mercy when we fall short. These du'as are not complicated, yet they carry meanings that sustain a believer for a lifetime. There is deep compassion in the fact that Allah puts these words in the Qur'an, recited by millions, so that no believer is ever left speechless before Him. Even when pain, fear, or confusion steal our words, Allah has already given us the language of return. Every taught dua is an invitation, a reminder that Allah knows our struggles better than we do ourselves. He knows what will save us before we even realize we are lost, and He gently directs our hearts toward what truly matters, while the world distracts us with everything else. Within the Qur'an, there are supplications that do not focus on a single need, but instead encompass the entire journey of a believer. A powerful Quranic dua that covers faith, guidance, and protection speaks directly to the reality of the human heart, acknowledging its weakness while placing complete trust in Allah's care. Such a dua recognizes that faith is not static, that guidance can be lost if it is not protected, and that a believer constantly walks through spiritual dangers even when unaware of them. By asking Allah to guard the heart, the mind, and the path ahead, this supplication becomes a shield woven from humility and reliance upon Him. Faith is the foundation of everything, and without it, no action carries weight. When a believer asks Allah to preserve faith, it is an admission that Iman does not survive through effort alone. Guidance, once granted, requires divine protection to remain alive within the heart. This dua teaches the believer to fear misguidance more than hardship, and spiritual loss more than worldly loss. It aligns the heart with what truly matters, shifting concern away from temporary trials and toward eternal outcomes. In asking for protection, the believer is not only seeking safety from external harm, but from internal deviation, from arrogance, doubt, heedlessness, and slow spiritual decay. This type of Quranic supplication also nurtures awareness. It reminds the believer that guidance is a gift that must be cherished and defended through constant return to Allah. Protection in this dua is comprehensive, covering moments of strength and weakness, public actions and private thoughts, visible choices and hidden intentions. It trains the heart to seek refuge in Allah before taking a step, before making a decision, and before facing trials known and unknown. Through this supplication, the believer learns to live with dependence upon Allah, understanding that true safety lies not in control or certainty, but in being held within the mercy and care of the one who guides and protects all hearts. Consistency in daily worship holds a depth that quantity alone can never reach. Many people begin their spiritual journey with bursts of enthusiasm, taking on long prayers, extended recitations, and intense routines, only to find themselves exhausted and unable to maintain them. Islam teaches a different rhythm, one that honors the human condition and nurtures the soul gradually. A small action performed regularly ingrains itself into the heart, shaping character, strengthening faith, and building a lasting connection with Allah. Through consistency, worship becomes a natural part of life rather than an occasional surge driven by emotion. When worship is consistent, it transforms the believer quietly and steadily. A short dua recited every morning, a few verses read daily, or a moment of sincere remembrance becomes a spiritual anchor. These acts may seem modest, but their repetition allows them to penetrate deeply. Over time, they soften the heart, sharpen awareness of Allah, and create resilience against neglect. Consistency teaches discipline and sincerity, because returning to worship daily without excitement or applause requires a heart that seeks Allah rather than instant spiritual highs. It also protects a believer from despair, as even on difficult days, small acts feel achievable and meaningful. Quantity, without consistency, often fades under pressure. Life brings fatigue, distractions, and challenges that make long acts of worship difficult to sustain. Islam does not demand that a believer exhaust themselves, but that they remain connected. A consistent practice respects human limits while nurturing spiritual growth. It keeps the door to Allah open every day, even if only briefly, and prevents long gaps of heedlessness. Through steady worship, a believer learns that Allah values persistence, sincerity, and devotion over grand gestures that disappear as quickly as they arrive, and that what is loved most by Allah is what remains, no matter how small, as long as it is constant and sincere. When this dua is recited at the beginning of the day, it quietly reshapes everything that follows. The words do not remain at the prayer mat. They travel with the believer into every conversation, decision, and reaction. By asking Allah for steadfastness, mercy, and protection early on, The heart is aligned before the world begins to demand attention. The believer steps into the day already anchored, already aware that guidance is fragile and must be guarded. This awareness influences choices, making one more cautious with words, more patient with people, and more mindful of intentions. This dua also reframes challenges before they arrive. When difficulties appear, they are not seen as random or overwhelming, but as moments already placed under Allah's care. A heart that has asked Allah not to deviate becomes more alert to subtle temptations, small compromises, and gradual slips. The believer becomes quicker to seek forgiveness, quicker to pause before reacting, and quicker to return to Allah when shaken. Mercy, asked for at dawn, manifests throughout the day as emotional balance, softened anger, and an inner calm that does not easily break under pressure. Over time, this daily supplication trains the soul to live with dependence upon Allah rather than self-reliance. Decisions are no longer made purely on impulse or fear, but with the awareness that guidance comes from Him alone. Even successes are received with humility, as the believer recognizes that remaining upright is not personal achievement, but divine care. This dua becomes a lens through which the entire day is viewed, shaping priorities, strengthening resolve, and gently correcting the heart whenever it begins to drift, turning ordinary moments into acts of consciousness and remembrance rooted in trust and surrender to Allah. There are moments in a believer's life when words fail to find an audience, when emotions are too heavy to explain, and silence feels safer than speaking. In those moments, Allah's presence becomes not just comforting, but essential. A heartfelt reminder that Allah listens even when no one else does restores dignity to the unseen struggles carried within the heart. Human beings may overlook pain that is quiet, misunderstand feelings that are complex, or grow tired of hearing the same worries repeated, but Allah never turns away from a voice that calls upon Him, whether spoken aloud or hidden within the chest. Allah listens without interruption, without impatience, and without judgment. A believer does not need to arrange perfect words or explain context, because Allah already knows what the heart cannot articulate. This awareness allows a person to return to Him in moments of weakness, confusion, or shame, knowing that no emotion is too small and no fear is too repetitive. When others fail to understand, Allah's listening becomes a form of mercy, reminding the believer that they are never unseen or unheard, even in solitude. This connection nurtures sincerity because a person speaks to Allah not to impress but to survive spiritually. Knowing that Allah listens reshapes how a believer copes with loneliness and rejection. Instead of hardening the heart or withdrawing completely, the believer learns to pour what cannot be shared into dua. Tears become a language, silence becomes supplication, and exhaustion becomes a form of honesty before Allah. This reminder builds resilience, teaching the heart that validation does not always come from people, and relief does not always arrive through answers. Sometimes peace comes simply from being heard by the one who understands every layer of the soul, every fear of the future, and every regret of the past, and who responds in ways that protect, heal, and guide, even when the response is not immediately visible. In the end, this reminder brings us back to what truly matters. The quiet moments after Fajr, the mercy of Allah in teaching us what to ask for, the power of a single Quranic dua, and the beauty of consistency all point to one reality. Our hearts are safest when they are turned toward Allah. When a believer begins the day seeking guidance, protection, and mercy, life does not suddenly become free of hardship, but the heart becomes equipped to face whatever comes. This daily return to Allah is not about perfection, but about sincerity, humility, and trust in the one who knows us better than we know ourselves. Let this dua be more than words recited out of habit. Let it be a daily conversation with Allah, a moment of honesty where the heart admits its weakness and seeks divine care. In a world that constantly pulls the heart in different directions, this supplication becomes a spiritual anchor, keeping faith firm and intentions clear. When no one else listens, Allah listens. When guidance feels fragile, Allah preserves it. And when the day feels heavy, the remembrance of Allah becomes light. Returning to Him at dawn is not just an act of worship, but a declaration of dependence, hope, and love for the one who never abandons the hearts that turn back to Him sincerely.